I am Carol Roth. I am a recovering investment banker and author of the forthcoming book in a couple of weeks, The War on Small Business. And the best advice that I have ever received goes something like this. You almost always have the opportunity to escalate a situation in the future, but you rarely ever have the opportunity to de-escalate a situation in the future. And that advice has saved my hot head many, many times.
Wow, Carol, that's great advice. I can only imagine how that served you. Who'd you get that advice from? Because that's really interesting.
So I got that advice from my dear friend who you may know, Donna Saul, who is a business strategist. And she gave me that advice and I was like, that is so brilliant. And there have been so many times where I've wanted to say something or send an email or right or wrong. And I've just sat with that and went, I can take this up in the future. I'm just going to put this in my bank. I'll take it up in the future if I need to, and it has really served me so incredibly well. And I have passed it on to other people who I know has saved them some important relationships as well. So that's like the little gift that keeps on giving. So I hope that you, Phil, can use it, and all of you guys watching can use it, because it is. I didn't come up with it, but it is brilliant.
Yeah, no, that's really good, and I forget that sometimes that it's harder to de-escalate than it is to escalate. But that makes
it's impossible. It's like literally impossible. So, and it's good, by the way. Like anything else, it was given to me in a business context, but like everything else, it works in a personal context as well.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. It's hard to take back words or actions or anything like that. Once that horse is out of the barn, sadly that horse is out of the barn for sure.
And even if you are in the right, it's just sometimes like you just never know when you're going to be put in a situation with that same person again, and you just need to have that clean for your own benefit. So just like save your ammunition, and if you need to use it, like you can use it, but it doesn't have to be in the moment.
That's so good. That's so good. Well, that leaves us with a nice segue here into the book, because certainly things have been escalating for a while in the country, and coronavirus hit us last year. We were just saying, I mean, I've talked to you in about, feels like a year and a half, but yet it feels like 10 minutes in some ways, right? So talk to us. So set the premise here for the book for those who haven't yet read it, because it isn't out yet.
Right. Yeah. So it's coming out in just a few weeks now, and you can pre-order it, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I was approached by HarperCollins at the very beginning of the pandemic, and they said, we want somebody who has an economic background and who is, a fair person to kind of do a debrief of what's happening economically. And so as things were unfolding real time, I was following it and trying to sort of craft a book. And what happened right up front, right in March, is it was clear that small business was going to be a big story, because they were amongst the first to be shut down. They, in many cases, were deemed non-essential, even though they're the backbone of the economy. And as the first package that, it was actually, I guess, technically the third package, but the first major package, the CARES Act, was crafted that had the PPP provision for small business. It was really crumbs that were being given to small business, even though their business and their property was taken for the common good, while all these cronies were getting trillions of dollars. And so it was clear, okay, we're having a situation where winners and losers are being picked. And as the year went on, you saw just in 2020 alone, more than 400,000 small businesses had been shuttered, millions more who were just fighting to survive. And at the same time, you had 7 tech companies who gained $3.4 trillion in value. And it became a record year for initial public offerings and for the values of these special vehicles called SPACs. So there was this huge imbalance going on. And, so that kind of set the thesis. And when I started digging in, it was clear that this wasn't just a COVID thing. This is something that's been happening for years and years, and that we really have this uneven situation going on that's moved us away from free market capitalism to something that's closer to cronyism. And obviously that's important for people to understand if you want to support economic freedom. And, we're talking before the pandemic, 30.2 million small business owners, 99.9% of all the businesses in the US, and accounting for about half the GDP and half the jobs, Phil.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so interesting, right? I mean, like you, right? I've worked in financial services, finance, whatever you want to call it, right? To watch this stuff, but it's so interesting because so many don't talk about this. They think the stock market is the indicator of how well the country is doing. And I would argue quite the opposite, right? We're looking at small business as being not just the engine, but the fire behind it, with the fact of these big tech companies really kind of being their own little unicorn.
Yeah, and you have to remember, if you think about small business, you've got people from every can you have a corner of the globe, every part of the globe? I don't know if we can have a corner of something around, but we'll just use it anyway. Every corner of the globe that you're trying to come to America because they see that as the opportunity to pursue this economic freedom, right? They want to take control. And it's not always about money. It's the opportunity to be flexible, to have ownership of something. And some of these small businesses grew up to be the biggest businesses out there. I mean, outside of a spinoff, every really big business started out as a small business. So it's really important. But it's also important from a power standpoint, because this concept of decentralization, the fact that you've got millions and millions of decentralized businesses, means that no one entity can control the narrative. That's what we want. That's free and balanced and fair. But when you get a couple of entities that all of a sudden become big and important, those who are in charge go, well, we'll just focus all of our attention on them, and who cares about the rest of these people? And then obviously we see the outcome of that in real terms, people's lives completely disrupted, their private property completely disrupted. That's their identities for many small business owners. And so it's something that this is a nonpartisan discussion. This is something that anybody who cares about having this ability for economic freedom, which is, we're the unique example of that in the world, is something that everybody should be fighting for. And nobody wants to talk about it because it's small, but it's not small. It's small individually. It's huge collectively, and it has a huge impact.
Yeah, the collective is massive. I mean, over 99% of businesses being in this category, being in this bucket, and yet they're not partnering up. So how did we get here, Carol? Like, what caused this years ago? Because this is not as you said, this is not a 2020 phenomenon. This is something that's been happening for years. How did we get here?
Yeah, so this is sort of the exciting part of the book, is to be able to go back and uncover what's happened. And I think that people will learn a lot. A couple things that I'll pull out are China and the Federal Reserve. So our situation with China is a really fascinating one, because we have exported capitalism to them, and they have moved along the spectrum. If you think about kind of freedom, choice, and all of that, and force and control, they've actually moved closer to capitalism. But then we've imported central planning, and we've moved further away from that and having more government control. So there's a little bit of like a trading places situation going on. And that's, again, because the people who are in power, who tell you that they have your best interest at heart, human nature, have their own best interest at heart. They want to keep that political power tight. And so they make decisions that are going to further that. And a lot of times they think they're smarter than what free market can do. Free market's all of us, millions of us, billions of us making transactions all over the world. And that's the information that drives things, instead of a couple of people deciding at their whim. I don't care who the person is, what kind of spreadsheets you have, you're not going to make a better set of decisions. So they figured that they were going to be able to change China into this great democracy, and it's going to benefit us. But it didn't. We imported some deflation, but at the expense of a lot of small businesses and innovation in the United States, at the expense of wage depression, at the expense of our supply chain. And so that's kind of one thing that's been happening. Certainly lots of regulations and anti-competitive things happening in that arena, which is sort of this no good deed goes unpunished scenario, like outside of the Great Recession. So in the Great Recession, when you had too big to fail banks that actually did things that weren't very smart, and we all paid the price for it. They got this bailout. And outside of that, we were going to regulate them to rein them in. But the outgrowth of that, and Phil, I think you may have read this in the early read of the book already, the outgrowth of that is that it basically was anti-competitive, and it limited the number of new bank entrants and small bank entrants. So now we have fewer small banks forming, fewer small banks who can compete because they can't afford all of this regulation. And then lending to small businesses went down, where lending to big companies went up. So again, the intention was good, like, oh, we're going to rein them in, but it actually gave the big guys free rein. So it's those kinds of things when people have these great intentions, but don't strategically think through them, and the power brokers take advantage of that, that ends up in a situation where we have this ongoing war against small business.
Yeah. Wow. That's so much that we're working against there. So how do let's just pick one of those there. Let's talk about the suppression or depression of wages. How in the heck do we still have such a low average rate, and yet Chipotle, for instance, their CEO gets a $40 million bump in pay because COVID was hard, but then they can't pass that along to the frontline workers? Like, well, that is such a disconnect.
So it is and it isn't, and this kind of goes back to like a deep understanding of finance and economics, which unfortunately we removed from our curriculum. And so a lot of things that sound really bad on the surface, when you start to break them down, you're like, oh, okay, well, like that, I guess, kind of makes sense. And again, I'm not trying to defend a big business, and I'm not trying to defend any business. I feel like taking care of your employees is a good thing, but there's also a market out there, and there's not an unlimited supply of money, because at the end of the day, if you have to get paid more, the person above you has to get paid more. It goes through a system. The same thing happens with the suppliers, and all it does is it ends up pushing up the prices of goods and services. So yes, you're getting paid more, but now you've got inflation on prices, and you're paying $23 for a slice of pizza. So the quote unquote inequality piece of this, if you look at somebody like Walmart, I think Walmart's, the CEO, the amount that he makes is equal to, on a yearly basis, $10 per employee. So if he gave up every dollar, like every single dollar that he had, like, you would be getting less than an extra dollar a month in wages. So it's not that he's making more at the expense of everybody else. It's just that he has higher compensation because, frankly, again, if you're in charge of a couple million employees and a quarter or $500 billion company, depending on where the stock price is, like, you should get paid a lot for that. That's not an easy thing to do. The other thing that people don't understand is that a lot of times, the compensation is tied to the stock price, right? So a lot of this isn't like he's getting actual dollars, he's getting shares of stock that have a certain value. And that's where the government has come in. The government came in via their cronies, which you'll again learn about in the book, called the Federal Reserve. And they have propped up the stock market through their interference of printing money and driving down interest rates. And it's inflated these asset prices. So a lot of the value was literally taken away from you and me in terms of the earning power of our dollar, or even just supporting us, and put into the stock market, and that inflates the price of the shares, and it makes it look like he's receiving this like outsized compensation, which again, if the stock price goes down, then that compensation goes down. So it's these intricacies, these nuances that people don't understand, and when the media reports on them, they're just trying to sow division and create clicks. So like, what's gonna get you to share this on Facebook? Like, oh, you're taking away money from everyone else. You've got this many times the amount that someone else has, other than he's getting paid $10 per employee, and this doesn't affect you at all. Now, again, there are things that do affect you with these big companies, when the Fed is interfering in the stock market and giving them more access to capital and increasing the value of their company, when they're getting special tax deals and special loopholes that small businesses can't take advantage of, when you have Amazon running around doing like a beauty pageant for their headquarters. Like, I don't know, Phil, like when you opened your business in a new location, did they have a beauty pageant for you? Did they like throw all these great things at you for coming there, or like, did they not even notice?
Yeah, I kind of miss the beauty pageant, Carol.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. So those are the kinds of things. So what ends up getting blamed on capitalism has nothing to do with capitalism. It actually has to do with the government interference in the market. Not to mention that all of their regulations not only make it harder for small businesses to compete, but add so many costs. Like we could talk about, I know it's not small business, but the housing market right now, which is insane. The National Association of Home Builders came out with a study in May that said for the average new house that's built, the amount of government regulation, that the amount that adds to the cost of a new house on average in this country is $94,000. That's $94,000 that you wouldn't have to pay. And then, of course, there's your property taxes that keep going up at like more than the rate of inflation. So it's all these things that if we had them out of the way and just focused on a smaller select group of things, that they would all have more money. We would have more wages. Our dollars would be worth more, and there would be more economic opportunity. But it's to nobody's benefit to talk about this, which is why people never publish books like this, right? Because like it's like the hidden secret. Like don't give away the secret sauce here.
Yeah, I was going to ask that because there aren't a lot of books that talk about this. I mean, and looking at what you're doing, I'm like, oh, this is very different, very differently positioned. So why don't, the secret sauce is probably one reason, but why do we think that it's the government here, that it's their role to control the free market economy instead of capitalism or instead of the actual free market itself?
So I think that this has been a concerted effort of miseducation. And the problem is that when you have like the government and they give you something, so regardless of who you are, if you're a farmer and you get special treatment, or you're an importer and your candelabra gets special treatment, or you get a special grant for this, like you don't want to give up your little thing, not realizing like the tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars you get up on the back end if you just did. Nobody wants to be that one person to give up their little thing. So I think that's part of it. Two is that we're really divided as a country. They've kind of, instead of, it's brilliant. And like I said, this is both parties. So both parties have gotten us to point the finger at each other and say, no, that person should pay more. That person should pay more, instead of all of us standing shoulder to shoulder and going, no, like you should spend less and you should let us keep our own money. So I think that, it's just been a really good trick. And because everybody's so, busy yelling at each other, I would say it's like, it's not like the red party or the blue party, it's the green party. It's your money. It's your economic freedom. So like we could all get on that and say, no. And here's like a great example, and this isn't in the book because it was going to be, but it was 160,000 words, and my editor's like, you can't have 160,000 word book, so gotta cut it down. But like, here's a great example of something like Social Security, right? We all pay into Social Security, but we pay it to the government, so we don't actually own anything. They spend it, they put an IOU, but that IOU, since they don't actually create anything of value, is just from the rest of us taxpayers, right? So like, why would we do that? Why wouldn't we just, even if it's by government mandate, even if they're like, well, we have to have a safety net, why, if you're working, wouldn't you just pay that money into your own fund? In Singapore, they call it a provident fund. And it doesn't have to be run by the government. It could be managed by you or like one of many different options. And even if they say, well, not everybody works, or what about this like small part of the vulnerable population? Okay, well, our employers, pay in for different things. Maybe a portion of that, a very small portion, goes into a fund for those people that you can apply and say, I'm not working, I want part of this pot. But like, if we controlled that, then you don't have the government as a middleman. You don't have them spending it. You get to participate in wealth creation in the stock market. That's not, or wherever else you want your house. Like, why do we need them to be the middleman? They want it because that gives them more power and control, but it doesn't help us. So those are the kinds of things where it's like, we're not saying like, you don't have to not have a social safety net. You could just give it back to us and let us be in control. And then you actually own it and you can pass it on to your heirs, right? Like it's yours. Like you worked hard and now you're giving this money away. They did a study, which is incredible. And I guess on average, like across all states, that we pay 35% of our lifetime earnings to some form of government. And if you live in New Jersey, you're paying almost 50% over your lifetime. Like that's insane. They don't need to do that. And it also keeps them from doing things well. I mean, we all know this, we're business people, right? Stay in your lane, do the couple things that you do well, instead of just them focusing on those couple of areas that are, in terms of protecting our rights and our country and whatnot. Like they're not doing these things well, and we're not even hiring experts to do them. Or it's like a popularity contest. It's how I became class president in high school, right? Like this is not a good model for like $8.1 trillion across the whole of government. So it's just something that, again, it's not meant to be political. It's just stuff that like where they're starting to intrude on our lives as entrepreneurs and small business owners, for us to like stand together and go like enough's enough. And you can do it independently, right? Like you don't have to, it's like, again, this is a nonpartisan issue.
Wow.
Yeah.
Over one third of our lifetime earning goes to pay for government. That's appalling, right. Carol.
It is. And again, even if you feel like these things need more structure, you could just be paying them back to you. It's the same thing. Like I know there's a push for healthcare. Like the reason healthcare is messed up is because the government's in the middle of that and doesn't allow for a free market. There's another way to address that in a very similar fashion. And there's a lot of good, papers out there that, again, I wanted to include, but didn't include because it was kind of off the topic of small business. But there's just a lot of stupid and silly stuff. I mean, as a small business owner, we talk about this, the level of like stupid crap. Like I have workers' compensation insurance that I have to pay in my business. My employees work from home on a computer. Like, why am I spending thousands of dollars a year on workers' compensation insurance? I don't run a dangerous factory. This is not 1912. Okay, maybe there was a reason in 1912, but it's not like in a digital economy and in a service economy, something that makes a lot of sense. And this is money that takes away from something that I could bonus out to my employees or put back into the economy in a different way. It's a way for them to funnel money to the insurance guys who are lobbying them and giving them campaign contributions. Like, same kind of thing, licensing for braiding hair. I mean, this has been a huge initiative. Florida has actually taken a huge role, but like think about, particularly in primarily African-American communities where hair braiding is like a huge industry, and they want people to spend thousands of dollars to get certification and then ongoing training on something that moms and dads do for their kids at home every day. You're not using chemicals. You don't even put a scissor near anybody's head. You're braiding somebody's hair, and you need to go through licensing. Like, what? Like, what are we doing? Yeah. This is America, right? Like, what?
Yeah, you can't even run a lemonade stand anymore without getting an EIN number.
It's in the book. It's in the book. But like, literally, the police come to shut down the lemonade stand. Yep. Like, is this really what we want? Do we want kids to have their lemonade stands shut down by the police? Like, I don't think so. And then someone's going to go, oh, well, it's not safe. Okay, well, then don't drink the lemonade. Take it and pour it out. You're an adult. You're smart. I wouldn't, you support the kid. You give him $1. You pour the lemonade out, and you go get one down the street. It's just not that complicated.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. More regulation is obviously not the answer. More government interference is not the answer here. It is a war. So Carol, if you were to give us as small business owners some advice, like how can we take this back for ourselves and make this better? Because I'll tell you, reading the book, it's obvious there's a lot broken. So where do we start with even fixing this crap?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like if I had a small business that was shut down on an anti-constitutional basis, I think it's like eminent domain, right? It constitutionally protects the government from taking your property without compensating you appropriately for doing so. I'd sue. And again, it sucks for the rest of us because, again, the government doesn't have money, but we all pay for it. But we need to start like suing, suing and challenging these things that are not constitutional and are not protecting our rights, but are actually hurting our rights. So like if my business was put out of business, I would find, and I think you can find a sympathetic lawyer. And if you want me to help you, I will put the call out, but I would find a sympathetic lawyer to start suing these local jurisdictions that put you out of business. But going forward, I think, first of all, just need to keep in mind as you're doing your risk and reward calculations that, now a risk factor for your business, as if you didn't have enough other things, is government. And to really think about the legislation that's out there and remember that not everything that you think is important needs to be legislated. Like we can all think that people deserve to be paid well, and not put that into legislation. We could all think that it's a good idea that in general, people have the opportunity to get health care from their business without putting all the gig workers out of business. I mean, just because you think something is right in most cases, when you put it into law, then it becomes the law in every single case. We have to stop legislating our morality and let people go in and transact freely in the market. I think that that's really important. I think the other thing is just supporting each other. One of the things that people do all the time, this is my joke, is they go, Alexa, why does Jeff Bezos have so much money? And it's because obviously you're shopping at Amazon. So not that there's anything wrong with Amazon on a standalone basis. They do enable about 1.9 million small and mid-sized businesses at this point. But at the same time, you don't want them to be the only game in town. So if you're not supporting other small businesses and helping lift each other up, which again, there's before COVID, 30.2 million of y'all. So probably, maybe 30 million or whatever it is, or 29 million exists now. Like, let's support each other. Let's buy from each other. Even with with the book, we're a small business. I've been telling people, go to bookshop.org. Bookshop.org will fulfill your book purchases from a local independent small retailer instead of Amazon. So it's just no less convenient. I know it's convenient to go to Amazon.com, but like you can go to bookshop.org. It's the same online little thing. So be more thoughtful, I think, about your own capitalism. And at some point, and I know this is like horrendous because we have enough to do and we all just want to be left alone, but we do need to be active and we do need to start calling our representatives and saying, like, this is not a great thing. And from what I've heard from people who focus on this, getting 10, 20, let alone 100 calls to a rep's office really changes the needles. And so, I know a lot of us don't want to be political or put it out there because we're afraid in this climate, what that might mean for our business, but you can still, find somebody who is like-minded and say, this is important to the small business effort in economic freedom, and make those phone calls quietly, but it becomes loud to the representatives on the other end.
Awesome advice. I love supporting each other. I love some legislation, and of course, supporting each other by buying each other's books and our own products instead of just on Amazon. I didn't know that your book was on bookshop.org. That's fantastic. That'll be where
it's a cool resource. I mean, it's part of what I uncovered. Like, it's, again, I didn't know about it either until I started going through this process, going, how can we get more small businesses involved? But like major books you can buy in other venues. You don't think about it, right?
Yep. Yeah. Well, a lot of authors, if you were talking about books, you can buy it directly from the author.
Right.
You don't have to go to Amazon. And yes, it might cost $1 more. Sucks to be you. Buy the book, support your people. Don't worry about that, right? So simple. Little choices we make.
Let me address that. That's the funny thing. So the same people who say, like, people deserve to be paid more and they should be paid, these kinds of wages and this, that, and the other thing, are the same people who get angry when the thing costs $1 or more. Like, it comes from somewhere. Small businesses, by the way, usually operate on margins of like 6 to 10%, depending on the industry. So it's not like they're like printing money hand over fist. If they increase the wages, like it's got to come from somewhere because they have to earn a living as well, and nobody's guaranteeing the wage of a small business owner. So like if you want people to be treated well, you should expect to also have to pay a little bit more. And if you're not, then understand that that's how this all works. And I said, I don't really care which side you're on, but just be consistent about it.
There you go. Great advice, Carol. So I know that you're big on Twitter. Folks should definitely follow you there. Carol J.S. Roth, and your wonderful website at carolroth.com. But if folks want, you said they should reach out to you about that stuff. Where do we send them? Where do you like to hang out the most?
So definitely Twitter is my home. That's where I spend far too much of my time. And then I also have a contact form at carolroth.com that goes to my team. And so if it's like more of a formal query that you want to put forth, you can do it there. But, I like to chat with people back and forth on the Twitters and have a good time, and it's like try to mix up like, some of this like super serious stuff with, some memes and animal videos, always throwing up the animal videos and pictures. So like, a little well-rounded scenario there.
Absolutely. You're a great follow, Carol, and a wonderful friend and an awesome author. Congratulations on your book. Really great book. Once again, The War on Small Business. I read the PDF. I can't wait to get a physical copy of that. Congratulations, and thanks for spending some time with us today, Carol.
And thank you, Phil, for your support of small business and this platform. As I said, I wrote the book, but it's not my story, right? It's all of our stories. It's the story of the little guy who's not getting the word out. And by supporting it, you're not supporting me because I'm getting paid my advance either way. What you are is you're telling publishers that this is important. This is an important story. So if you want more publishers to publish these things and to get the word out, got to buy the books. That's how it works. Capitalism. Vote with your dollars, people.
There you go. It's the Green Party, folks.
That's
the
right.
War on Small Business on bookshop.org. Carol Roth, you're a gem. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Philly.
My pleasure.